All right, so we'll know the date soon enough. Let's bring in the Australian Electoral Commissioner, Tom Rogers, will we preview all of this. Thank you for your time. I suppose you have normal sort of numbers of registration and enrolment ahead of federal elections. How's it tracking ahead of this referendum? Have you had a similar uptick or not as much?
Thanks, Tom. The federal electoral roll is in the best shape it's ever been since Federation. We've had, not just related to the referendum, but over the last few months, last couple of years in particular, a big growth. Also a big growth in the Indigenous roll as part of that, the estimated Indigenous roll. So there's very healthy signs for democratic participation.
All right, well, that's positive then. Once the date is announced, the wheels are in motion. I know you're already busily preparing for things, but obviously the rolls close. What about the other elements of this? Early voting, for example, is that set? 2 weeks of early voting. If people voted somewhere at the last federal election, they'll probably be able to vote at the same place?
That's right, Tom. It would look and feel very much like an electoral event. For most of Australia, there'll be 2 weeks of early voting, the availability of postal voting. We're returning to pre-pandemic levels of the overseas vote. There'll be in-person voting in a very large number of Australia's overseas missions. In some remote areas, there'll be a slightly longer period of mobile polling, remote mobile polling. So there's lots of options for people to access the vote and ensure that they can exercise their franchise.
In terms of the scrutiny element and what people have to do, it's a bit simpler than your normal election. It's a yes or a no. Are you accepting anything inside the box? A tick, a cross, a yes, a number one? How broad will you sort of allow this, given the intention of people is going to be pretty clear, you'd think?
Tom, it's a great question. And just for people listening, please make sure you write on that box yes or no in English. Now, there are some savings provisions, but I need to be very clear with people. When we look at that, it is likely that a tick will be accepted as a formal vote for yes, but a cross will not be accepted as a formal vote. We're being very clear with people. Part of our education campaign will talk about this. There'll be materials in the polling place so that people can look at it, but please make sure you write yes or no clearly on the ballot paper in English, and that way you can assure yourself that your vote will count. Plus, there's a practice voting tool on our website, and please feel free to go and have a look at that and to use it to make sure that your vote counts.
So a tick is accepted, you believe, and a cross, no. Does that effectively inflate the yes side? The no side might say, well, hang on, it's a lower bar for the yes side?
No, not at all, and they couldn't be taken that way, but that's why we're spending a lot of time talking to the community about what constitutes a valid vote. There'll be very clear information on the ballot paper in the polling place. We're spending a lot of time on that issue, and what we're trying to do is to make sure under the legislation that when the voter's intent is clear, that those votes are included.
But in that circumstance, if a vote's not accepted, it's just not in the final tally. So when you are counting up 100%,
it'll be an
whatever it comes out of there.
Vote. If it's informal vote.
Informal, yeah. Okay.
And again, it's so critical for people to follow those directions and make sure that they actually use, I'm sorry, Tom, as I cut across you there, but to make sure that people write either yes or no. We're being very clear about this, before the event, during the event, during all the materials, the campaign that we're currently running that launched on Sunday. There'll be information there. There's information on our website already, and I'll urge people to do that.
Final one on this. I know it's sort of nitpicking. What about Y or N?
Again, the legislation says yes or no is a formal vote. And there are some things called savings provisions. And given the fact that we're trying to give effect to the voter's intent, it is likely that a Y or an N would be counted under the savings provision. But I get nervous even talking about that, Tom, because then people hear mixed messages. It's just important to write either yes or no on that ballot paper.
Yeah, I understand your point. I'm being that pesky devil's advocate. I understand your message out there is to try to get everyone doing exactly the right thing, and then if they fall slightly short of it,
absolutely,
perhaps it's accepted anyway. Pamphlets. So what's happening? When are they dropping in letterboxes, and what's been the process for checking these as well?
They're already appearing in people's letterboxes, Tom. We've had a lot of feedback that people are receiving them, which is great, and that'll continue to be the case. It really is a huge job. I think printing around about 13 million of those pamphlets. There's two parts to the pamphlet. There's the yes-no case produced by the parliamentarians that voted yes and no at the front, and then a booklet from the AEC at the back. We completed printing last week. In fact, I took the final copy off the print. And they're already being distributed. They'll be in every household's letterbox, well in time for people to be able to access that information. There'll also be translated versions available on our website, and there's a whole range of other accessible formats as well.
Perhaps I need to check the mail, or maybe Canberra gets us a little bit later than others. I know you've spoken before around
No, Tom, just to be accurate there, I think Canberra are actually already receiving it as well, so it's fantastic.
Are they? Okay. I'll check the letterbox when I get home. Misinformation, I know you've spoken before and your main job is around process. Does that mean, just as an example, I mean, if someone on the no case says, oh, vote yes and $1 million will go to every first Australian, that's just outside of your parameter? You're more about the process, or does that fall within what you do?
Tom, that's right. We talk about the process. So I might give you some examples if you don't mind. We've seen online some information recently where people talk about the fact that there will be 2 questions on the ballot paper. I can tell you there'll be 1 question on the ballot paper, where people say it's not compulsory to vote. And again, I can tell you that it is compulsory to vote in the referendum. All of those sorts of things we actually talk about. But just like an election, a referendum is a contest of ideas. It would be inappropriate for us to become involved in that for a whole range of reasons, because our neutrality would be brought into question. So that's a matter for the campaigns and for citizens to make sure that they're consuming information and making an informed choice.
Have you seen a big uptick in that misinformation about the process, perhaps since a certain Northern Hemisphere election was much contested after a certain president alleged some things?
So, Tom, as you know, I'd never comment on another country's electoral system, so let me talk about elections more broadly rather than the hypothetical one that you were just hypothetically talking about. Over the last couple of years, we've seen an uptick in mis and disinformation online. It's one of the reasons why we've established a disinformation register on our website, again, to talk about the electoral process, not about the topic. We've seen a lot of stuff, and I want to be very clear about this. Australians have the right to believe and to say all manner of things, and clearly they do, and that's great, but we have a responsibility to make sure that there is the correct information out there about the electoral process. We have seen an increase in that, which is unfortunate, and also an increase in incivility online on our own social media accounts, which is something we would prefer not to be the case, and we're continuing to talk to people about the need to be civil and to engage respectfully with everyone online.
Yeah, well, and then in person, I guess, when it comes to those voting booths. A final question, if I can, on, I guess, security of elections, because if you get into that area of a dispute or, God forbid, a hack, are you a sort of keep it paper and pencil forever type person?
Tom, I'm very conscious that that's a matter for Parliament, but I'm also conscious I am the CEO of one of the world's last great analogue events, and it is a very secure process. It is very open and transparent. One of the key transparency measures for that manual system is the 100-odd thousand members of the community who work for us at election time, and I'd be a real shame to see that miss. And Tom, just while I say that, if people are listening, we're always looking for people to work for us at election time, and I'd urge people to jump online while they're watching this, check their enrolments up to date, and secondly, put your name down to work for us at the election.
All right, there's a good plug. If you want a bit of extra money, it's, I guess it can be casual and all different hours and so on. So just reading between the lines there, without perhaps, I'm sort of constantly trying to get you in trouble today, but I guess that's what we do. Without commenting on what might happen forever, you're very pleased that the old-fashioned pencil and paper means that no matter what happens, you can always count them up again.
you are trying to get me in grief, Tom, and I guess what I would say back is I'm very confident that that's a parliamentary decision, but I'm very happy to be the commissioner of a paper and pencil-based voting system.
All right. Tom Rogers, I think you've still got a job at the end of all that. Thank you for your time. Talk soon.